The morning David burst into my office, I was reviewing quarterly reports that showed exactly what he wanted: success. Numbers that proved I'd not only survived his betrayal, but thrived despite it. "This is bullshit, Marcus," he shouted, slamming his hands on my desk. "You're making millions while I'm struggling to keep my company afloat. We started this together. I deserve half." I looked at my older brother, noting the expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his desperation. His perfectly styled hair couldn't mask the gray creeping in at his temples. David had always been the golden child, charming, confident, seemingly destined for success. Now he looked like a man watching his empire crumble. "Funny how you remember partnership now," I said quietly, "when 5 years ago you had no problem stealing the Anderson contract and leaving me to deal with the fallout." His face flushed. "That was business, nothing personal. You were too cautious, too slow. Anderson wanted results. Anderson wanted quick profits, and you gave them false projections to get their business." I cut him off. "When it all fell apart, you let me take the blame. Remember that, David?" I did. Every excruciating detail was burned into my memory. 5 years ago, Anderson Corp had been our biggest potential client. Landing their contract would have transformed our small software development company into a major player. David had been lead on the project, handling all client communications while I managed the technical side. What I didn't know was that he'd been lying to both sides, promising Anderson impossible deadlines while hiding their true requirements from our development team. When everything imploded, he jumped ship with the remains of the contract, leaving me to face the lawsuits and debt. "That's ancient history," David said, waving his hand dismissively. "Look at you now. Pioneer Tech is one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. The same industry I helped you break into, by the way." I felt my jaw clench. "The industry you tried to lock me out of after you left? When you called every contact we had and told them I was unreliable, incompetent?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I was angry. You wouldn't listen to my ideas, always insisting on doing things your way." "My way?" I stood up slowly. "You mean the legal way? The way that didn't involve fraud?" David ran his hands through his hair, his composure cracking. "Look, I know I made mistakes, but we're brothers, family. Whatever happened between us, that doesn't change." I almost laughed. Family. He played that card before, when he needed something. When he wanted me to cover for his mistakes, to work longer hours while he took credit for my innovations. "Why now, David? Why come asking for half my company today?" He hesitated, and I knew I had him. "Stone Tech is making moves," he finally admitted. "They're acquiring smaller companies, consolidating the market. My company, we're not in a position to compete." There it was. David's company was failing, and he needed a lifeline. Stone Tech, our biggest competitor, was known for aggressive takeovers that left nothing behind. "So you thought you'd claim half of Pioneer Tech?" I asked. "Based on what? The partnership you abandoned 5 years ago?" "I have documentation," he said, pulling out a folder. "Emails, meeting notes from when we started the company, proof that I was an equal partner." I smiled then, reaching for my own files. "Funny you should mention documentation. I have some of my own to share." I pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it on my desk. "Before you say another word, David, let me show you what I found when I started rebuilding after your betrayal." His eyes narrowed as I spread out the documents, emails, bank statements, and contracts that told the real story of his deception. 5 years ago, you didn't just steal the Anderson contract," I said quietly. "You were embezzling from our company for months before that. Siphoning money into private accounts, charging personal expenses to company credit cards." The color drained from his face. "That's not. You can't prove." "But I can." I pointed to specific transactions. "You got sloppy, David. I was too focused on the technical side to notice the financial irregularities. But after you left, I had to understand exactly what happened to save what was left of the company." "Those records are old," he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "They don't matter now. The statute of limitations on fraud hasn't expired," I replied. "And there's more. Your lies to Anderson. I found the original communications, the fake projections, the altered timelines. Everything you used to convince them to sign with you instead of staying with our company." David sank into the chair across from my desk, his earlier bravado evaporating. "Marcus, be reasonable. We can work something out." Like you worked things out with Anderson. How did that go, by the way? I knew exactly how it had gone. Anderson had sued David's company last year over breach of contract. He barely survived the settlement. You're really going to do this? He asked. Destroy your own brother. You tried to destroy me first, I reminded him. The difference is I have proof of everything you did. Proof I've kept quiet about for 5 years while I rebuilt what you tried to tear down. His expression darkened. If you expose this, it won't just hurt me. Think about Mom and Dad. The family name. Don't, I cut him off. Don't pretend this is about family. It's about you needing a way out of the mess you've made. Again, I thought about our parents who had always believed David's version of events, who had called me ungrateful when I refused to reconcile with my brother after his betrayal. They didn't know about the fraud, the embezzlement, the countless lies. Here's what's going to happen, I said, gathering the documents. You're going to leave my office and never come back. You're going to stop telling people you helped build Pioneer Tech, and you're going to find another way to save your company from Stone Tech. Or what? A hint of his old arrogance crept back into his voice. Or these documents go to the FBI, the SEC, and every client you've lied to over the past 5 years. Your choice. He stood up slowly, straightening his designer tie. You wouldn't dare. It would devastate the family. I met his gaze steadily. Try me. As he reached for the door, he paused. You've changed, little brother. The Marcus I knew wouldn't be so ruthless. The Marcus you knew died the day you betrayed him, I replied. You might want to remember that before you try coming after what's mine again. After he left, I sat back in my chair, my hands shaking slightly. On my computer screen, an email notification popped up. Our latest acquisition had been finalized. Pioneer Tech had just bought another small software company, one that specialized in security systems. The irony wasn't lost on me. While David had been destroying relationships to get ahead, I'd been building them. While he'd taken shortcuts and burned bridges, I focused on sustainable growth and innovation. My phone buzzed. A text from our mother. David said you threatened him. Why can't you let the past go? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began reviewing the security company's integration plans. Let David run to our parents with his lies. The truth had a way of coming out eventually. The next morning, my assistant Sarah rushed into my office. Mr. Marcus, you need to see this. She handed me her tablet, open to a business news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Stone Tech announces merger with David Chen Software Solutions. My brother had made his choice. Now it was time to make mine. I stared at the headline, understanding hitting me like a physical blow. David hadn't come to me for help. He'd come to assess Pioneer Tech's vulnerabilities before aligning with our biggest competitor. Stone Tech was notorious for hostile takeovers, using insider information to target companies. By merging with David's company, they gained access to everything he knew about Pioneer Tech's operations, client relationships, and technical infrastructure. I immediately called an emergency board meeting. As I waited for everyone to arrive, I reviewed the documents I had on David's past fraud. They were my insurance policy, but using them would mean exposing everything, including how long I'd known about his crimes without reporting them. The merger announcement goes live in an hour, I told the board. Stone Tech isn't just acquiring David's company, they're positioning for a hostile takeover of Pioneer Tech. How do you know? Asked Janet, our CFO. Because my brother just spent yesterday demanding half ownership of our company, I replied. He was gathering intelligence for Stone Tech, looking for weaknesses. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Everyone knew the story of David's betrayal 5 years ago, but few knew the full extent of his deceptions. We have options, I continued, but you need to know everything first. Over the next hour, I laid out the complete history, David's embezzlement, the fraud, the carefully documented trail of his crimes. I explained how I'd discovered everything while rebuilding the company, how I'd kept the evidence as protection. Why didn't you turn him in? Asked Robert, our head of legal. Because exposing him meant risking Pioneer Tech's reputation when we were most vulnerable, I said. But now we can use this information to stop Stone Tech's takeover. My plan was simple but risky. We would release evidence of David's financial crimes to the SEC, but only the parts related to his current company. It would torpedo the merger with Stone Tech, without exposing Pioneer Tech to scrutiny about our past. Stone Tech's due diligence will uncover these issues eventually, I explained. We're just accelerating the timeline. Once they realize David's company is radioactive with fraud, they'll back out. The board voted unanimously to proceed. Within hours, our lawyers had prepared the necessary documentation and submitted it to regulatory authorities. The effect was immediate. Stone Tech's stock plummeted as news of their merger with a fraudulent company spread. David's company faced immediate investigation, and the merger was suspended pending review. That evening, as I worked late in my office, David stormed in again. But this time, he looked desperate rather than arrogant. "You've ruined me," he snarled. "Stone Tech is backing out, my investors are fleeing, and the SEC is investigating everything." "You ruined yourself," I replied calmly. "I just made sure everyone else could see it too." "I'll tell them everything," he threatened. "About how you knew and kept quiet. About all of it." "Go ahead," I said, standing. "Pioneer Tech is strong enough to weather the storm now. Are you?" He left without another word. The next day, David Chen Software Solutions filed for bankruptcy. Stone Tech's takeover plans for Pioneer Tech were quietly abandoned. 1 month later, I sat in my office reviewing acquisition proposals, not for my company, but from it. Pioneer Tech was now strong enough to start absorbing smaller firms, growing sustainably through careful expansion. My phone buzzed with a text from our father. "David's lost everything. His house, his reputation, his future. I hope you're happy." I typed back a simple response. He lost those things himself. I just refused to let him take my company down with him. Looking out over the city skyline, I thought about the journey from that devastating betrayal 5 years ago to now. David had taught me an invaluable lesson. Success built on lies eventually crumbles, but success built on innovation and integrity lasts. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Marcus, the integration team for our new security division is ready for you." I gathered my files, ready to focus on Pioneer Tech's future. David had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. In the end, the truth had done what it always does. It had come out, bringing justice with it.
The annual Evans family dinner at Le Cirque was a tradition steeped in judgment and backhanded compliments. Crystal glasses clinked as my sister Victoria held court, her diamond bracelet catching the light with every dramatic gesture. "And then," she announced to our parents, "Sterling Corp's stock jumped another 20% after my proposal. The board practically begged me to take over as CFO." She turned to me with that familiar patronizing smile. "How's the receptionist work going, Emma? Still answering phones at that little investment firm?" I took a measured sip of water, ignoring the way Mom and Dad exchanged their usual disappointed glances. My simple black blazer felt out of place among their designer wear, exactly as I'd planned. "Actually, I'm an executive assistant now," I said quietly, playing my part. Victoria laughed, the sound drawing attention from nearby tables. "Oh, sweetie, still fetching coffee for the big boys? You know, with your economics degree, you could have done so much more. Remember when we both interned at Sterling? I became CFO and you—" She gestured vaguely at my modest attire. "Victoria's doing extraordinary things," Dad chimed in, his pride evident. "Sterling Corp is becoming a powerhouse under her leadership. They're even talking about expanding into Asian markets." I nodded, checking my phone discreetly as it buzzed. The message made my lips twitch. "Acquisition complete. Press release scheduled for 8 p.m. "Emma, put the phone away," Mom scolded. "Just because you work as a secretary doesn't mean you need to be on call during family dinner." "Sorry," I murmured, noting the time, 7:55 p.m. Victoria reached across the table to pat my hand. "You know, I could put in a word at Sterling. Maybe get you a better position. Something more ambitious than answering phones." "That's thoughtful of you," I said, taking another sip of water. "How are Sterling's quarterly numbers looking?" "Magnificent," Victoria preened. "We're about to announce our biggest quarter yet. The CEO is thrilled with my performance." "Speaking of performance," Dad added, "your sister's being featured in Financial Monthly. Rising stars under 40. When was the last time you read a financial journal, Emma?" "This morning, actually." I checked my phone again. 7:58 p.m. Victoria rolled her eyes. Reading your boss's schedule doesn't count as financial literature, darling. I was actually reviewing acquisition reports, I said softly. What would you know about acquisitions? Victoria scoffed. Does your boss let you make copies of the big important papers? My phone vibrated one final time. Wall Street Journal alert posting now. Actually, I said, reaching into my briefcase, I know quite a bit about acquisitions. Especially the one that closed 20 seconds ago. Emma, Mom sighed, please don't make up stories to compete with your sister. I pulled out a thick manila envelope just as Victoria's phone chimed. She glanced at it, then froze, her perfectly manicured hand shaking slightly. That's impossible, she whispered, staring at her screen. What is it? Dad asked, reaching for his own phone. The Wall Street Journal, Victoria said, voice trembling. It says Atlantic Global just acquired Sterling Corporation. But that's impossible. We would have known. Check the CEO's name, I suggested quietly, sliding the envelope across the table. Victoria's eyes widened as she read aloud. Atlantic Global CEO Emma Evans, 32, becomes youngest female banking chief to complete a major acquisition. The crystal glasses rattled as her hand hit the table. Your new boss, I finished, opening the envelope. Actually, former boss. Your termination papers are right here. Effective immediately. The silence at our table felt like a vacuum, broken only by the distant clink of silverware from other diners. Victoria's face had gone from shocked white to furious red as she frantically scrolled through news alerts on her phone. Atlantic Global. Dad muttered, adjusting his glasses as he read. Largest private banking acquisition of the year, $8.2 billion deal. Spearheaded by CEO Emma Evans. His head snapped up. Emma. I straightened my simple black blazer. Armani, though they'd never noticed. Remember when Victoria got promoted to CFO at Sterling? That same month, I became the youngest board member at Atlantic Global. Last year, I became CEO. But you're a secretary, Mom stammered, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. No, I corrected gently. I was evaluating Sterling's operations personally. Best way to assess a company is from the inside. I turned to Victoria. Your employees are quite chatty around the coffee girl. Especially about creative accounting and inflated quarterly reports. Victoria's hand clenched around her phone. You spied on us? I did due diligence, I replied. Those Asian market expansions you bragged about. The numbers didn't add up. Neither did your last 3 quarterly reports. How dare you, Victoria hissed. I built Sterling's financial division from smoke and mirrors, I interrupted, pulling out more documents. Would you like to discuss the offshore accounts? Or the misreported earnings that somehow always lined up perfectly with your performance bonuses? Dad reached for the papers, but I held them back. Those are for the SEC now. The SEC? Mom whispered, her face draining of color. Don't worry, I said, checking my watch. The press release only mentions the acquisition. The fraud investigation will be quieter. Victoria stood up so abruptly her chair scraped across the floor. You can't do this to me. I'm your sister. Sit down, I said softly. You're making a scene. A scene. She laughed hysterically. You just destroyed my career. You destroyed your career, I corrected. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Though I must admit, I added, allowing myself a small smile, buying your company was particularly satisfying. Emma. Dad started, his authoritative tone falling flat. Surely there's some way to. The deal is done, I cut in. Sterling Corp is now part of Atlantic Global. And Victoria's creative accounting methods are being reviewed by our forensic team. My phone buzzed again. The board meeting starts in an hour, my actual assistant texted. Victoria sank back into her chair, mascara smudging as tears formed. How long? She whispered. How long have you been planning this? I thought about all the family dinners I'd sat through listening to her boasts. The Christmas parties where she'd mockingly offered me entry-level positions. The countless times she'd reminded everyone that she was the successful sister. Remember 5 years ago, I said, when you told the entire family I was wasting my potential as a bank teller? I was actually closing my first billion-dollar acquisition that week. Mom's wine glass tipped over, spreading red across the white tablecloth like blood. All this time, you were running a major bank? The third largest private banking group in the country, I confirmed. Though after today's acquisition, we'll be moving up to second. The maitre d' approached our table looking concerned at the spreading wine stain. I handed him my black card, the one Victoria had always mocked as corporate expense account. Dinner's on me, I said standing up. Consider it a severance package. 3 days after the family dinner, I stood in my corner office on the 60th floor of Atlantic Global Tower, watching Manhattan's skyline glitter in the morning sun. The Wall Street Journal sat on my desk, our acquisition of Sterling making front-page news. Banking's silent queen. How Emma Evans built a financial empire in secret. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Ms. Evans? Your sister is here. Victoria entered, looking drastically different from the polished CFO of last week. Her designer suit was replaced by casual wear, her perfect makeup absent. Security cleared me up, she said quietly. Though I guess my credentials are worthless now. I gestured to the leather chairs facing my desk. The forensic audit is complete. And? Her voice trembled slightly. We found everything, I said, pulling out a file. The manipulated earnings reports. The offshore accounts. The kickbacks from Asian investors. I closed the folder. The SEC is very interested. Victoria's shoulders slumped. Are you pressing charges? That depends, I replied, sitting behind my desk. I'm prepared to handle this internally, if you cooperate fully with our investigation and return all improper bonuses. You're protecting me? She looked up, confused. Why? I studied her for a moment. Because watching you destroy yourself wouldn't be satisfying. This way you get to live with knowing how badly you underestimated me. My phone buzzed. The Asian markets were opening. Victoria noticed the alert and laughed bitterly. All those times I bragged about Sterling's global reach, she said. Meanwhile, you were actually running a worldwide financial empire. She gestured around the vast office. How did none of us know? You never asked, I said simply. You were too busy telling everyone how I'd failed. How I was just a secretary. It never occurred to you that I might be something more. Mom and Dad haven't stopped crying, she said. Dad's golf buddies keep asking about the secret billionaire daughter they never knew about. Karma's interesting that way, I observed, standing to pour 2 glasses of water. Would you like to know when I decided to buy Sterling? She took the offered glass. When? Last Christmas. You announced your promotion to CFO by giving me a book called Moving Up from the Reception Desk. I smiled slightly. I was in the middle of negotiating a merger with Swiss Global Bank. Victoria's hand shook, water splashing slightly. I remember. You said you had to leave early for a staff meeting. Board meeting in Geneva, I corrected. I closed the deal at midnight and was back for Christmas dinner the next day. You spent the entire meal explaining basic finance terms to me. A fresh tear slid down her cheek. I was so horrible to you. You were, I agreed. But now you have a choice. Sign the cooperation agreement, return the money and start over. Or face the SEC investigation alone. She stared at the document I slid across the desk. What happens to me after I sign? You'll be barred from C-suite positions for 5 years, I said. But I've arranged a position at our Singapore office. Middle management. A chance to earn real success this time. Why would you help me at all? I walked to the window, looking out at the empire I'd built. Because true power isn't about destruction, Victoria. It's about having the ability to destroy someone and choosing not to. My phone buzzed again. The morning board meeting was starting. Victoria stood, clutching the signed agreement. I'll never underestimate you again, she said softly. No, I agreed. You won't. As she left, I adjusted my simple black blazer. The same one they'd dismissed as cheap at dinner. My assistant entered with the morning reports. The Sterling transition is proceeding ahead of schedule, she reported. And the family banking details you requested? I smiled slightly. Move their accounts to our premium service. Waive all fees. Very generous, she observed. No, I corrected, picking up the Wall Street Journal with my photo on the cover. Just good business. After all, success isn't just about making money, it's about earning respect. Through the glass walls, I watched Victoria walk to the elevators, her head bowed. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't in crushing your opponents, but in rising so far above them that they're forced to look up to you. The morning sun caught my nameplate. Emma Evans, C. Atlantic Global Banking. Below it sat a small frame, the only personal item in my office. Inside was a worn business card. Emma Evans, Reception Desk. A reminder that every empire starts somewhere and the best revenge is living well.